Hello, welcome to week 4, episode 4 of The Man's Mind. I'm here with Patrick Nugent. Is that how you say it?
Close enough, Nugent. It takes a lot of people to get it right.
Nugent. I was going to say that's
worries.
going to take a lot of practice. That was something I should have done in the intro before we jumped on
That's all
live,
good.
but this is authenticity.
Hey, we're raw and real. There we are.
Yeah. Jumping on today to talk to an absolutely beautiful, heart-centered man who is the founder of the Conscious Fatherhood, whose message is about father and son connecting through the rite of passage. Do you want to say hello, Patrick?
Hey, how we going, guys? Thank you very much for having us on, Danielle. By the way, I know that it does take a lot to line it up sometimes for parents. So, no, I appreciate the opportunity to share my journey. And yeah, despite the hiccups at the start, it's all perfect.
It is. I think the level of authenticity when these sort of things pop up help people to really resonate and engage and understand as parents, you can still live your purpose and show up. And I remember reading a quote once that said, do it and do it badly. And I really enjoyed hearing that, because it's like if we wait for perfectionism, then we would never actually achieve anything, because the reality is that we live in an imperfect world, and that makes it perfect enough.
I love that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask everyone who's tuning in and watching to please engage and give us some feedback below. This is about raising awareness and connecting men throughout this podcast series to help see that you as a man and through society's conditioning, you don't actually have to do this alone. It is not weak to go into vulnerability and to healing, and the more self-awareness and inner healing you do, the more that your external reality will become the life that you actually want to live. So to do that, we need a little interaction, share the love, tag people that you think will enjoy the value of this conversation. And on that note, I'm going to ask Patrick to please share with us a little about his story and how he has come into the conscious fatherhood and what sort of begun that, and a little bit of your journey into healing and self-awareness.
Well, normally I would first start out with just saying I'll keep it brief, because for anyone that does know me, I don't get Patrick Have a Chat as a nickname for no reason. So I'll I'll keep it short and sweet, but as heart-centered as possible. Look, for me, it's definitely a tale of two halves. Growing up where I did, my early childhood was pretty much the polar opposite of how I live today. I grew up in a small country town, your typical coal mining, pretty much we're only known for coal mining and football. Those are the two things. And as you can only imagine, growing up not only in a small country town, but in a culture that's largely surrounded by men that sort of don't understand how to be conscious. Obviously in the football team, it was all about sort of, growing up around, sort of drinking and that culture of sort of, like blokey blokes. And, there was a lot of times where, there could be topics that are brought up where in this day and age could be sort of, scoffed at as being, sort of sexist or, sort of degrading people and things like that. And there can become that sort of negative culture as to sort of, the footy team and stuff like that. And even in the mining industry, I was an electrician for, the best part of a decade before I got into the work I'm into now. And you can only imagine in the mines as well that a lot of this sort of stuff stemmed from a closed mindset about sort of what was out there in this world. And I grew up in a very blue collar lifestyle. So, it was that sort of typical, you go to school. My parents were very blue collar as well. So, my mum stayed at home, my dad worked. It was that sort of stereotypical view of, the male provides, the woman stays home. So I sort of grew up with that, and I didn't sort of know anything else outside of that. And for me, I hung around with a lot of guys that were sort of at a level that they didn't really want to progress. And it got to a point throughout my life where that just became the norm. I was the partier. I was the guy that was just sort of, showing up everywhere. People were like, oh, where's Paddy this weekend? Is he is he in the Sundays? Is he in Europe? Is he down in Sydney? Like, where is he? And I never really thought there was anything wrong with that. Like, that's just who I was. That's who I sort of hung around. And it got to a point where I just said, is this all there is? And, I don't know why that happened. I don't know sort of the defining point as to sort of what made it happen until probably into my late teens, when I actually decided that, is this all there is? And, I'd been in my hometown for 20 years. I always say, like, I was there for a life sentence and then I got out. So, and for me, it's like, I still know guys to this day that are still there doing the same thing, the 9 to 5, they've got the cushy job, but I mean, they're never sort of wanting to go to that next level and explore what's next. And for me, once I actually packed up and I moved, I went through a huge change of discovering who I really wanted to be. And, I was still doing the things that I, going in, out every night, drinking three nights a week, just being silly and, hey, enjoying life, because that's what we did when we were younger. But for me, it got to a point where I wanted to challenge the status quo. And once again, it came about, I think, just based upon the life that I'd always thought was there. But once I actually moved down to the Sunshine Coast, I don't believe it's by chance, but for me, I actually ran into a men's circle that was down here. And for me personally, it actually only came about from a chance meeting. And, I'm not a big believer originally in, it was meant to be and all this sort of stuff. I was like, it happened. It is what it is. But we actually came across one of my beautiful wife's friends that she hadn't seen for a very long time at university, who just happened to be in the healing space. And he said, hey, by the way, I was like, I don't have many friends around here. I don't know anyone. I've just moved down here. What are you up to? Like, what do you do on the weekends? And he goes, I just happen to actually be going to a burger night tonight. So it's like a burger and chat night. And it seems pretty blokey, but the guys who were there were not guys who were sitting there talking about, like, hitting the piss and watching the footy. These guys are actually talking about conscious conversation, something that to me sounded airy-fairy or, wishy-washy at the time. But for me, I was like, I'm going to give it a crack. And coincidentally, by actually dropping in with these guys, it sort of cracked open a different level of sort of consciousness and understand, like, these guys are actually doing stuff with their lives. These guys aren't just going out and hitting the piss 3 nights a week. These guys aren't just, going ahead and just trying to, get the next fun thing in. And the funny thing was, they had kids there as well. So for me, I always knew I wanted to be a father. Now, looking back, before I thought, fuck that scares the hell out of me. I don't want to do that at all. But just by sort of changing my perspective on life and understanding that, hey, there is more out there, I started hanging out with these guys and being open to the possibility of what is out there and what else can happen by opening up your mind. And that's just when, it got to the point where I was like, I'm a father now. And, to backtrack, I literally had my first child in a space where I had no support network other than me and my queen. We were overseas. To let people know, we're actually in China. So still kind of somewhat a developing country, a very different country. And we were pretty much in another continent with no support. So you kind of got to figure your shit out pretty quickly, to put it in the easiest of words. So backtracking through my journey of fatherhood, I literally just had to understand there was a different level to be at. Now I'm responsible for another human being. Now I'm responsible for 2 human beings. And do I want to still be that guy that goes out every single night? Or do I want to be someone who's present and actually have my children remember me for being, not that dad that sort of just is there every now and then, or is, the dad that's present. So by hanging out with these guys, it just gave me an opportunity to actually crack open my heart, be vulnerable, and sort of just go deeper and finding out what my purpose was and where I wanted to go in life. But I wouldn't have had that had I not taken that leap originally back in my early teenage years to just, to understand what else was out there in the world. But by doing so, I'm now at a point where, I love my life. I love the ability to connect in with my boys and find, the silver lining in things that beforehand would have just frustrated the shit out of me, or I would have not even considered an option. So right now in this moment where I've got up to at this point, it's been a complete, like I said, polar opposite transition. It's allowed me to really sort of just appreciate the difference in, sort of moving away from those that don't serve you and surrounding yourselves with those that want to elevate you.
Yeah, beautiful. And I always get curious. See, my journey is very different. So I love hearing other people's journeys and sort of where that moment of that thought of what else is there, or there has to be something more to life than this, or something greater comes from. Do you feel like in that moment for you that you, like, there was this inner seeking and curiosity that comes out? Is that sort of like why there was this point that you were like, is this all there is?
Yeah, because for me, I think, look, it's open to interpretation for every man and every woman, but from the perspective of a male and, as a man, as a father, as a husband, I kind of feel as though as men, it's probably the scariest question we face in our entire lives is, what is my purpose? Like, why am I here on this planet? And to get to a point where you actually have to ask yourself and sit in that sort of darkness and sit in that awkwardness absolutely scares the shit out of us. Because what it does is it basically puts us in a situation where we got our backs against the wall and we have to face it. We have to face off with it and say, what is our purpose? Is this all we have? And the thing is, if the answer literally scares the shit out of you, then it's beautiful. Because it clearly shows that there is more there to us. It clearly shows that we haven't been living to our full potential, but we've been too scared to face off with it because of our sneaky sidekick, the ego. And as all men, we know that there's that sort of, I guess, that driven sort of nature of us to be, to go, and to always be sort of, the doers and that, the checker offers. And we always want to make sure that we're sort of being seen as doing stuff and being successful. It's just who we are. We're very logical driven beings. But for me, I just sort of, I felt like it got to the point where I needed to challenge the status quo, because so many men go through life just going, like, well, I may not know if this is all there is. This is what I'm used to. This is what I'm comfortable being in. And this is who I've defined as me. And they get comfortable because they're surrounded by other people that follow the same practice. So if they're surrounded by the same tribe, they just want to stay on this level, then it's comfortable for them. And they don't need to explore anything more, because the brain doesn't want, our mind doesn't want to support us in that. Our mind wants to trick us and be, a devil, and, wants us to just sit in that comfortable state. But if we look to break through that, then that's what's on the next side. And that was my moment, is that I sat back and I had to have some pretty hard truths that I sat with, that at one point, entering into not only a relationship, but a marriage, and then being a parent, I was always that jokester. I was always that partier. And unfortunately, once I started to become defined as that, I was like, people literally don't take me seriously. People just think that I'm just a joke. And the thing is, I was always trying to be that people pleaser. I was always trying to be that jokester, that, the one that was in the limelight, because I was too afraid to see what else there was. So by being in the limelight, not only as a parent, but as an individual and as a man, it was easier, because a lot of men aren't willing to actually open up and be vulnerable in that state for fear of what's going to come next. Could be the ridicule, could be the mates drop off. All of a sudden, the mates you had don't become your mates anymore. But the beautiful thing is that by doing that, it allows you to actually open up space for new people to come into your life, people that might want to actually see you go to a higher level. The thing is, we just don't know that. We think that at the end of the day, our problems are our problems. But there's fucking so many other men out there in this world that literally are facing off with the same demons, that are also thinking that in their own perspectives as well. Like, it's all my shit. But until we actually release that, find out what's next, that's when we can truly start moving forward and actually elevating not just ourselves, but those that we surrounded by, our children, the next generations to come, our mates, our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, whoever it is. But it's until we take that leap that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that was really beautifully said. And there's so many areas that I'd want to touch on. But I think that just the way you express that and its overall effect on how vulnerability is so fearful, but how men are so fearful of being in their vulnerability because of the judgment. But then when you allow yourself to be in that space with other like-minded souls that can receive you, how you can grow and actually support for yourselves and for each other, but then how it flows off into the rest of your life. One of the, I guess, the questions that I wanted to ask is, at what point in your journey did you meet your queen? And sorry, I'm not sure why that's going up. Did you connect with her, and how did that come into your relationship dynamic? Were you already like working on yourself on a conscious level when you met and connected, and then, or was it during the relationship and before you had children? Because I'm a little bit lost with the timeline.
No, so for me personally, when I actually moved to Sunshine Coast, I was still basically my usual sort of partying self. I was very much sort of blinded to, sort of this conscious, personal development, connecting in with men's circles. I was pretty much just working in a sales role. I was still going out every weekend. And I actually coincidentally was running a sales company, co-running a sales company on the Sunshine Coast. And the guys that were in my team actually were living next to my now wife, who actually had come over to visit. So I was over there, I was partying loud, usual self. And obviously, caught her eye, and then vice versa. From there, obviously our journey developed somewhat quicker than most people would. But obviously when you're in love, you're in love. And look, like being perfectly honest and jumping on here being raw is something that I'm all about. And there was a lot of rocky moments when we first started, things that purely because I wasn't a person like I am now that can actually sit back and appreciate the wrongdoings that happened and the ways in which I actually approach things, and sort of a sense of more immaturity as well, even while I was still in my 20s. For me, when we were actually together, within a year's time, we literally had gone from dating to move in together. Then my wife actually got a job over in China. So I actually quit my job and moved over with her. We got engaged and then had a child, all within the space of a year. So it was a pretty fast moving thing. And for me, this was still working out the relationship as well. It takes a long time to actually get to understand another human being and really appreciate who they are and sort of their quirks and their nuances and everything. But we sort of done it in fast forward, like really fucking quickly. So, and sort of when that happens, there is going to be a lot of hurdles and a lot of sort of roadblocks and things like that. And look, my beautiful queen actually summed it up the other day when sort of we'd gone through a bit of a rocky patch. And she said, while we've had probably a lot more shit happen in our lives together than most people would have in the period of a lifetime, and we've been together for 7 years now, if we were going to be finished up at some point, we would have been finished up a lot earlier than this. And for me, it's been a real long grinding journey for us to actually be openly communicating, be more conscious together. Me and my wife were both pig-headed at the very start. It's just very stubborn by nature within our personalities and very closed off. Me with my childhood, my wife with her childhood. And for us personally, I was on a completely different journey to my wife. My wife is obviously on just a very sort of, look after the family, make sure that the family is happy, make sure I'm happy in my job, and that's fine. And then I was sort of floating around trying to find myself, going from this job to that job, signing up to this course, going to that men's circle. And look, as men, the funny thing is, and this is not all men, but from my experience, we like to flutter. It takes a long time sometimes for men to actually find their true purpose in life. And the problem is, until we actually find something we're happy with, we're going to be jumping like a bloody frog from, lily pad to lily pad. We're going to be jumping around. And it's scary as hell for sometimes for the feminine energy, the female in the relationship, to actually not have that security and that sort of understanding that, you know, you've got my back. Because a lot of the times they just want security. They want to know that they can, you know, be held, be, you know, seen, and not have to freaking, you know, hold that masculine energy all the time as well as the feminine energy, because it's just going to drain them. And, you know, it's like, fuck, I'm already a parent. I'm already a mother. I can't be the fucking husband as well. I can't be the father as well. Jesus Christ. So
I think
for me
that's a
personally,
really, really good point. Like a really important one for a lot of people to that would resonate or to understand is that when a man's going through the process of finding his purpose and that exploration and curiosity and self-development, it does mean trying different things and putting your energy into different areas and just discovering, wait, hang on, I'm not who I thought I was, or who my parents told me I was, or through who society has said. And now I've got to try and experience all these different things to find out actually what brings me joy, because I didn't know. I just did what was expected of me. And
yeah.
that does definitely freak the feminine energy out, because
Oh yeah.
from what I've seen and experienced, is that the feminine, the level of safety and security, it isn't even about what I think the conditioning is of, like, the financial security. It's more around the security that your man is consistent and knows who he is. And it's like, at that time, that man doesn't actually know who he is, so that's like triggers their own stuff. And that would have been a really challenging journey for you. How is experiencing that helped you with the people that you work with, to have like this level of, you know, going through and finding yourself primarily, and probably levels of her finding and healing herself in the relationship? And how has that helped you with the men that you work with?
For me, the easiest way to sum it up, and it's something that that once again took me a long time and was scary as hell to sort of actually journey through. The one piece of advice I gave myself looking back on it was just dropping the expectation of time. And for me, the reason why I mean that is as for me, going through the journey I was in, I always had such high expectations of who I should be, not who I would be as an individual. And the thing was, I'd always put a time bracket on that. Now, I guess the reason why this stemmed from it is in the relationship I hold with my queen, there was always sort of like you've been doing this for 1 year, you've been doing this for 2 years or 6 months or whatever it is, and you're still not there. And once again, it becomes back to that security thing of, who are you? And so I need to know who you are, and I need to know that I'm safe enough to be with you, because I need to, like, because I know who I am, but you don't know who you are. And in doing so, that scares the shit out of me, because I need to have that comfort and understanding and knowing that you've got me if things fall through with me. You know, if my journey falls apart, I need to know that you've got your journey and your shit together, so then you can hold me when I need it the most. The thing was, I was putting unrealistic time expectations on myself to get those things done, which then a lot of the times would fall out of congruency, fall out of alignment, or I'd be putting way too much pressure on myself, and then I'd actually go ahead and fall out of love with it, even though it was something that I truly cared about. But by dropping that expectation of time and just understanding that it will happen when it's meant to happen, might sound cliche, but it's just something that I'm a true believer in. I've found that when I speak to a lot of the men that I talk to, predominantly fathers, could be single fathers, first-time fathers, you know, fathers with multiple children. At the end of the day, probably 9 times out of 10, the biggest thing that I find out is just the insecurity of knowing who they are and feeling as though they need to have that sort of imposter syndrome of needing to get it done tomorrow. And the thing is, the reason why is because a lot of the times we feel as though we need to catch up to the status quo. We need to be that person that we emulate, but we don't. Because if we look back at that person's journey, did they get there overnight? Fuck no. It could have taken them 5, 10, 15, 20 years to actually work out who they were. I've got a very close mentor of mine who now actually has 3 children under 5. 3 children under 3. Scary as hell. like scary as hell, just like bam, bam, bam. And for me, he's someone that for a long time, I actually tried to catch up to. I was actually trying to catch up to him, which for me was just like a hamster wheel running back. You know, I was just on a hamster wheel because I was trying to be this guy. The problem was I was never slowing down enough to actually be present with myself and understanding my journey first and truly looking into how long it took for him.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like you can, I think that's just ingrained in the masculine energy anyway. There's this level of competitiveness and in humanity in general of comparison. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not as far as them, or I'm not doing as good as that. And this judgment and expectation that I should be here. And the reality is, well, we all grow at different rates as well. And if you're trying to hurry along your journey, I feel that when people try and jump steps sometimes with different tools, or they're trying to be somewhere where they're not actually there, it's not maintainable, because you've missed the primary parts and the tools and the awareness that match to staying at that level of frequency of consciousness. And then it can have some uncomfortable effects when you keep dropping back into this space, and then you go into self-judgment and the inner critic jumps in, and it's like the negative story and the negative self-talk starts, and then all of a sudden you're like spiraling down again, instead of this level of allowance of, okay, I'm okay with where I'm at. No, I don't have all of the answers. That's okay. I am putting, like, you know, one foot in front of the other, seeing what pops up for me to work through.
Yeah. And that's one of the big things that I guess just came up for me when you were speaking then, was as men as well, not only do we, I guess, try and sometimes catch up to somebody, like, you know, we're trying to sort of fast track our success, but there is the whole thing of tall poppy syndrome where, you know, generically as men, as well as even women, we actually feel guilty for celebrating our success. And the big thing is, a lot of the times we also hold resentment towards ourselves, thinking that because somebody we emulate has, you know, just created wrote a book, or they've, you know, just sold out a course or whatever it is, that maybe because we had a breakthrough and we were able to actually do a live on Facebook, that's not worthy of who we are, even though that's a huge win for a lot, you know, for somebody that maybe has like anxiety around public speaking or something like that. And it's those small stepping stones that I've actually worked on myself, understanding to actually sit in the present moment and acknowledge myself and appreciate my successes, no matter how small they are, because it's those little wins that you have along the journey that's the actual real success. It's not the end goal, but a lot of the times what I would do is I'd start at A, and then by tomorrow I want to be at Z. And it's like, you know, and in doing that, if you didn't actually hit that, then you failed. But the thing is, all those little stepping stones, those little wins along the way, were the real wins. They were the real successes. The end goal was never really the win. It's how you get there that actually makes a difference. And that's something that I had to sit with for a long time, a lot of conditioning that I had to work with a lot of people around. And that's what I talked to a lot of the guys about as well. One of my close friends that I was just speaking to the other day, and obviously I won't mention his name for privacy, but he actually had a lot of issues surrounding his position within his family as a man and as a husband. He didn't feel that he was bringing enough value. He didn't feel like he was being seen enough. And he was trying to sort of literally just be this sort of perfect father. Like everything had to be in place, and, you know, his queen had to, you know, roll out the red carpet whenever he came home, and sort of like his boys had to shout his name from the rooftops. But I said, dude, the funny thing is, by putting those false expectations on yourself, or the expectations of time, I have to be this by tomorrow, it's never going to get there. Because what you're going to do is you're going to put yourself into such a spiral that the true things you wanted to work on is literally just being present with your queen. Your queen just wants you to show up for her. Your boys just want you to be there for them. It doesn't matter how you are there for them. It's just they want you to be there. And I always said there's a difference between showing up and opening up. Anyone can just show up and just be there. But honestly, for me, opening up and being present and actually physically, you know, giving them your time and love, that's all they ever really want. And for him, he just sort of had to sit there and sort of like, dude, you've literally just blown my mind. Like, for me, I never even looked at it in that perspective. I always sort of had to be some sort of perfect view of a man for my queen to adore me and my kids to adore me. He stepped back and literally took away that expectation and just said, look, just because they're with my, my queen so much more doesn't mean I'm a horrible father. It just means that I've literally been looking at it the wrong way. So when he started just having those little moments with his boys and appreciating the little wins, he messaged me back like a couple of weeks later and said, mate, my boys have never wanted to be hanging out with me more than they ever had in my life. My queen has been approaching me to spend time with her more because she can see just this glow in my face. And I was like, it's not rocket science, man. But the thing is, as men, it fucking takes a lot to appreciate that and actually sit in our shit, because that's when we actually have the most growth.
Yeah, 100%. That's really beautiful about the presence and how that's all any woman and child, and I believe men desire, is that level of actual connection where you open your heart and you're there, and it's like you have the ability to be vulnerable, and that might be messy at times, it might be beautiful and clear, and it's like, but you're there and you're connected and you're hearing and you're feeling through it more. And I think that, there's these false beliefs around how to be a good parent. And I know definitely from my experience from the feminine energy, the more conscious that I get, the more that I've just seen that my kids just want me to engage with them. They just want to be heard. They just want to feel validated. They want to feel loved, and they want genuine connection time. And that's really all they want from me. There is this level of, the challenging things of what school brings up at times, and different friends that, can have different family dynamics, and that will bring up different topics to be brought up and talk through. But when we sit down and have heartfelt discussions, and I try and teach my kids to have their own level of consciousness and questioning beliefs and looking at things. And I'm curious to see how you have seen your relationship with your boys and this work has affected that with them. Like what is the significant changes, and what do you see within the relationship with your children?
Beautiful topic. Beautiful topic. I was actually hoping you would ask this, just because this has probably been the biggest, I guess, shift for me in how I approach my life. I guess the reason behind it is that, and once again, this is something that I believe probably every father or even every sort of, man goes through at some point in his life, even if he doesn't have his own children, if it's just like a mentor or someone that he's working with. For me, I often, when I first started my journey, I know we spoke about this off camera just today, about balancing between our vision and our children, and sort of making sure that we've obviously, have that in harmony and make sure we can, honor both of them. When I first started into this, I kind of felt as though I could only give 50% to both. That was just my mindset. I was never really fully giving everything to both. And it often become a situation where I actually held resentment. And I actually hated myself for it, but I didn't know any better. And I'd actually hold resentment towards anything that would block it, whether it be work, whether it be my children, my queen, any sort of uncontrollable circumstance. And I actually started to find time with my children. And, it was hard for me to admit this, but I often felt they were a distraction. They were actually a distraction in holding me away from my vision, hence why I built resentment around that. And as a man, I knew that this was definitely not where I wanted to move forward with, especially if I was going to be in my full integrity and be in my full, sort of honoring of my beliefs and values. How could I possibly go ahead and support fathers and men through their journey of connecting deep with their children if I didn't hold that relationship with my own children? It was like, because I was just like, well, it's completely out of alignment. So for me, what I actually felt the beautiful thing was, no matter what line of work you're in, and for me, obviously wanting to work in with fathers and connect in with them to find their true purpose, and then, pass that on to their children and sort of connect in on a deeper level, I actually found ways to sort of shift my perspective and reframe the way in which I actually hang out with my children, not just on a surface level, but actually going down to their level of what they want to do. And my boy really didn't understand what I was doing. He never really had an understanding of why I was doing it or why I wanted to do it or even what I was doing in general. And I kind of felt like if I'm going to actually have a more connected relationship with him, I need to start involving him in what I'm doing. So I actually started saying, hey, mate, look, you're going to obviously have to get up a little bit early. I'm going to have to drag you out of bed because I know you're a bit of a sleepyhead, but I'm actually going to, I want to know if you want to come down to the meetings. So basically the men's meetups that I was actually doing once a week, whenever he had the chance and I had the chance to actually go to them, I would actually take him down. Now, he didn't fully know what was going on at all when we went down there, with obviously the meditation or the breath work, or, going through the chats that we had. But for me, just him being surrounded by other men that, at a conscious level, opening up and being vulnerable and sharing the wins and the challenge they were having, for me, it just sort of put him in a beautiful space where he could actually know there is men just like dad that are willing to open up and shed a tear and sort of, just talk about what was on their heart, because they'd never been exposed to that before. Neither had I. So it was a beautiful journey that we could connect in with. And it got to a point where after being there for so long and coming to so many of them, that he actually started asking without me even having to ask him, hey, Dad, can I go down and hang out with your friends? I want to go down into the men's circles. And while he didn't actually connect in, because he still felt nervous, obviously, young kids, he didn't sit there and do the meditation or things like that. But, he'd come into the conscious conversation afterwards. We'd go get a coffee and a feed, and he'd sit there and he'd chat. The guys might have a chat to him, and he'd be talking back to them. And for me, it was just a beautiful connection and a heart-centered moment that I know that I was changing that conditioning of life. Nobody in my life had ever sort of opened up like this. My dad, my brothers, whoever, it's who we were. But I was trying to break that chain and sort of pass down that beautiful wisdom and that heart-centered connection to him so that he can pass it down. And for me, just by doing that, it's actually then changed the way that we actually operate at home. So many times when I've had a moment of, as parents, we all still lose our shit. We all still, have moments where we regret what we did. But beforehand, I used to just say it is what it is and move on, and never think about the after effects of how it actually hurt him or what it did to him in the long-term effects. He's 5 now. We all know that getting into like sort of between 0 and 7, between, that 5 and 7, things stick. It might not show up now, but it could show up in their later years. And for me, now when I actually have a moment with him where we maybe clash, there might be sort of, words said that, hurt him or something that I didn't mean to do, but I actually sit there afterwards and have a conversation with him. Hey, mate, look, Dad went ahead and did this, but I just want you to know that obviously the reason why this happened was because X, Y, Z. How are you feeling? Did that make you feel sad? Did that make you feel mad? What's coming up for you? And, maybe you might say, make me feel sad. Cool. What do you think Dad should do better next time? And I'm involving him in the conversation so he can start understanding. And, there might be moments where I break down crying while I'm doing it. Thing is, though, I don't hide it. I don't run into the next room. I just make sure that I'm there and he sees it and everything. And he's asked me before, Dad, why are you crying? And I say, mate, that's because what it is to be a conscious man, to appreciate and sit in the moment. And I want you to see this. I want you to know it's okay to feel like this. I don't want you to be trapped into sort of that stereotypical view of what a man is. And it's just changed everything.
Yeah, that's definitely something that like deeply resonates with me on my journey in from my perspective with the conscious parenting. Is it was funny, I brought consciousness into everywhere in my external world with my clients and my friends and relationships, but my children was the last place that I started to actually use the tools that I'd learned. And I was I was wondering why I was so aligned, and then I'd be at home along with my children, and although there was a level of consciousness there, it was like still so much unconsciousness. And I was just watching the energy within my body, and I was like, how am I not using everything I know here? This is the most important part of my life. And the moment that I decided to, we are only as conscious as we are in our homes and around our parents, really. That if you want to know where you really are on your spiritual journey, then that's going to give you a big indication. I was like, wow, I have such an opportunity to teach them the things that I never learned. I have an opportunity to show them how to recognize emotions in their body, to how to feel, through what those bodily sort of triggers, like what a trigger feels like, the contraction in the body, and to recognize where's anger and how does that feel, and to talk them through that, and then to let them see that I can own up to when I had made mistakes. Like, I think that ownership before was really not there. I would either, before I'd really started to embody all of that consciousness, I would like get upset, and then I would just cry and be like, I'm so sorry, mum, you shouldn't have done that, rather than actually having a conversation of sitting down and saying, what I did was out of, frustration, or because I didn't feel heard, and talking around that in this like really heart-centered space, and really dropping into that softness as well. Because for me, whenever I'm in my masculine in that space, my children don't listen to me. I have to really get into this like soft open-heartedness of receiving and gifting energy for them to even hear me. And when I do that and I really open up into that space, it's amazing the things that they will turn around and say to me in my moments of, being triggered. And then they'll give me a little bit of a reminder, and I'm like, wow, this is just like, wow, thank you, I love you. And I found that connection with my children has just, it's not even, there's no words for it, because the parent that I was 2 years ago is so far from the parent that I am now. There's no yelling in our house. I barely ever get frustrated. It's more of a collective community where, I mean, not all the time, of course, I'm human, and so are they, and we're learning. But, I used to be one of those mums that would be like, put your shoes on for like 10 times, and they still wouldn't have their shoes on, and I'd be like dragging them out the door, trying to put them in the car to get them to school. And that is not something that even exists now. It's like the level of the children being heard and feeling like they can express themselves in all their energy has made them open to receiving me and working together. Is that, does that resonate?
It definitely resonates. It 100% resonates. And I was, as I was just listening to it, I sort of had my own sort of feelings arise, that sort of brought up a beautiful example that I wanted to share, especially I think it'll definitely hit home for a lot of the fathers. And that was all around the big emotions. And like, I kind of got that from what you were saying, is that especially for my 5-year-old, obviously even my 2-year-old has big emotions, but my 5-year-old especially, it's kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde thing with a lot of kids, when it comes to sort of tantrums and good behavior. But our kids are always most comfortable in the home. We know that they can be like perfect angels outside, and then they come home and they're like throwing stuff and jumping around on the, and it's chaos in a can. But the thing is, for me, shifting my perspective on those big emotions, and me and my wife have had to go through this, quite a lot with our boy recently. But for me, when he gets to a point where it's just, there's no going back, and, he's having a massive tantrum, and, just feeling those really big feelings, beforehand, we'd try and sort of just stop him in the moment and just try and cut it off. And that was it. And just sort of move on and sort of, stop crying. Let's get going. Let's, and never really letting him feel his emotions. And for me, it's just because it was scary. You're just like, he's just crying, he's screaming. You just want it to end and get back to normal. But the thing was, and I think I probably learned the biggest lesson from my queen, and I got to applaud her for that, because unfortunately I was a little bit more pig-headed in the situation. Enough, it's the dad thing, the bad cop, where you're a little bit more of a hard ass. But in the moment, I sort of would be the reactive versus the responder. So I was the one that was reacting versus responding, whereas my wife was responding and making it a little bit more calm and a little bit more in flow, like you mentioned. And when our boy would have those moments, rather than stopping him, what we'd do is we'd let him just go, screaming, crying, throwing pillows, doing whatever. He'd storm into his room. We'd go in there. We open it up. It looks like a tornado's going around. There's like pillows and chairs being thrown and books. And the thing was, once he'd done that and got all of that out, I think when I was away on a work road trip, my wife actually, we spoke that night after one of these tantrums happened. And she said it took half an hour for him to calm down. Now, that might seem excessive. That might be like, oh, your kid's got problems, but each kid responds differently to certain situations. And after that half an hour, she went in there and listened, and all of a sudden he's just like giggling and laughing, and she sort of peeked in, and he's just like started playing with some of the stuff in his room. And then 10 minutes later, she went back in and everything was clean. Comes back out and he goes, "Hey, Mom, how's it going?" And he was just super happy. "Let's go play." And like everything was back to normal. I was like, and that was a Jekyll and Hyde thing. It's like a lot of the times as fathers, we feel as though we need to be in control. We need to sort of, it's that preconditioning, get in your place, sort of, that sort of bad cop, and sort of shutting it off, because that's what maybe happened to you when you were younger. But it's understanding from the feminine energy that you need to be a little bit more softer in the approach, understand that kids have big feelings just like we did, because we were a kid at one point as well, and not trying to sort of belittle them and sort of put them in a corner, because all that does is it squashes the emotions down. And then we know what happens with that. It just keeps going down further. And then later on in life, who knows when it's going to open up or in how way. So for me, it was just a real big eye-opener to understand that and sort of take the lesson, not only from my kids, but from my queen, and sort of just adopting a little bit more of a feminine energy approach, and sort of, taking away that bad cop badge and just understanding to be a little bit more nurturing in the moment.
And I think at least I know so my eldest is 9 and 7. And so with those age groups, the more that they feel they can just express, and, even to the point that my 9-year-old can get quite, I guess you'd call it pre-teeny. And, she can turn around and say some pretty nasty things to me, but because I don't reprimand her and I just allow her to speak to me that way, and I don't react and I don't contract most of the time, the actual level of how she feels once she's spoken that way, she started to recognize. And she'll often turn around and she'll be like, "I'm so sorry that I spoke to you like that, Mummy. It made me feel really yucky inside. And it's not actually you that's the problem. It's da 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 da." And I think that's what happens when it's children don't have the ability to talk about what's going on for them. They haven't yet worked out that part of their mind to even express it. And half the time they don't even know what it is. They don't even know what the emotion is. And it takes time to identify, and, is excitement fear? Or, they're very similar in energies. So is this actually anger, or is it sadness? Or, they don't know how to express that. And as they're learning, sometimes I think it's a lot easier for them to do it with their safe person, which is usually a parent. I know that I have been the safe person for my kids to just express. And the more that I've just allowed that and done that more feminine nurturing, the more that they'll just break down and share what's happened afterwards, rather than me shaming them and guilting them for the way that they've exploded. Because that shame and guilt, and I could have quite easily turned around like my mother did in a lot of situations and said, that was abusive and you've really hurt me, and gone and had a cry for 2 hours in the bedroom and then sulked around the house and caused me to feel all this guilt and shame as a teenager, and younger, and guilt and shame are some of the lowest vibrational emotions and feelings. And when they starts to build up and build up, that's where I see a lot of damage in people, but a lot in men, a lot of disassociated shame and guilt in men, through these dynamics. I guess that actually can bring me to one of the questions I did want to ask you about, which was, what are some of the areas and emotional sort of blockages and things that you find that you work with men with the most? Like, what's the focus points?
For me, I think that there's probably three that are the biggest ones. I would say probably one of the biggest ones, I guess, that I've seen as more of a common trend is just the guilt. And guilt is a massive one on a number of levels. It's not just sort of a surface level thing, but one of the biggest things is the guilt of just sort of not living up to not only their own expectations of what they believe they should, sort of based on the status quo, but I do find there is a lot of guilt surrounded that goes a lot deeper back to your childhood. And this was one that was a massive one for me, is that guilt around the expectation of who you think that your parents think you should be, which was a massive one for me, which I didn't even actually know about till later on in my life, that sort of hit home. And just, I guess, the guilt of not knowing, who we are as men. And for me, I think the big one is that we feel guilty because there's sort of a certain predisposition that we should, that's just the way of life, that we know that we should know who we are. So therefore we have the ability to go ahead and provide for our family because that's what we're conditioned to do. And a lot of that guilt falls back into a number of different levels, because then it builds what I believe is one of the other ones is resentment. It builds resentment towards us as an individual, that we don't feel like we are good enough. It builds resentment to then blaming the external, and putting sort of false resentment out into the world of, towards our partner or our kids, or, the reason why I'm not here is because of, the job I didn't get, or the reason I'm here is because, my friends keep on, dragging me down, or whatever it is. And a lot of the guys that I've spoken to, once they understand that these are false beliefs, and they're more limiting beliefs, and they can actually break through that, it really does come back to, sort of the one major thing. And that, for me, the biggest out of all of them, not even guilt or resentment, it's fear. And for me, it comes in two different aspects. It's the fear of failure and the fear of success. And it doesn't just come through from like a job perspective or a career perspective, but the fear of, I guess, not living up to who we want to be and not like our full potential, which is the fear of failure. And then, okay, cool. If we actually have that perfect life with our family, if we actually have our boys loving us and our queen adoring us, and I've got that perfect job and everything is sweet. If I get to that level and then I actually don't feel happy and I have a fear of success, what's next? It's like, where am I at in my life then? And it becomes then, like I said, that hamster wheel where you then have to go back and go, I've been searching for this my whole life, but I didn't want to get there. And now I've got here, but it actually wasn't what I was searching for. And then they have that fear of like, fuck, am I ever going to actually figure it out? Am I actually going to ever understand who I am as a human? And, a lot of the guys I work with that are fathers are around my age, sort of at 30s, 40s or whatever. And once again, it falls into that fear of time, the expectation. I'm 30, I'm 40. I should already have my shit together. I should already be successful because X, Y, Z is. The thing is, one of the things that I actually talk with them about on a more deeper perspective is, what happens if your whole entire journey in life was not results based? What happens if your entire life was not around having this certain conceived idea of success, but it was just to be a fucking father? What happens if your entire journey in life was not to get that promotion or be that amazing coach who gets seen all over Facebook, or, be smashing as a six-figure, coach bit, in a biz? What happens if it was just to be present with your kids? What happens if it was just to be a fucking amazing husband? And a lot of the guys,
yeah, that there is huge for a lot of people. I see there's this level of expectation to meet that idea of what I should be doing and my purpose. I should have found this by now. It actually takes away so much from just living. And it's okay. Like, I've also communicated with some people that, their purpose is actually just to have a loving relationship and a close family life that's quite quiet and just connected, and they do things together and they live like, I guess more like I guess small. I don't want to say small, but I'm trying to think of a different word. But like basic, they're happy with the basic things. And it's because that's what it has to, your purpose lines up with your values. So it's the most important thing to know is like, okay, what are my values in life? Because if I don't know what they are, then it's going to be really hard for me to find what's in alignment with that. So I can find what my purpose is. And your purpose, and especially for the feminine energy, I know that the feminine energy, a lot of women or men in their feminine compare themselves to having, I have to live a life with purpose. And if I don't, then I won't be fulfilled, or I'm not meeting this bar of what society's sort of decided. And just in that, there are some people that are happy to just live in love, and that level of, yes, I want hobbies, and yes, I want to create, but the love energy and just the connection and having family is enough for them. And I think there's a lot of wrongness put around that as well. And it can cause pressure to a person just being present in their experience, because it's like, oh, well, that's not enough. I should be, I should be doing this. And isn't it okay to just live?
100%. And I think that labels are a devilish thing. We often label a lot of things. We put a lot of people on a pedestal, of this and that. And one of the biggest questions I ask the guys that I have worked with in the past, and even to this day, is I just get an answer. What is purpose? Like, what is purpose to you? Like, because it holds so many different meanings. And like, being as open and honest as I can right now, I held a lot of toxic masculinity around that. I did. I would take it out on my queen and my kids. Like I said, I would hold a lot of anger and frustration and resentment towards it, because I didn't know what purpose was at the time, my true purpose. And for a lot of the fathers out there, or even to be fathers, or or the single dads doing it tough, the one thing you've got to realize is this: I don't honestly believe with my hand on my heart that we can find our true purpose until we're fully aligned with those we're closest with. I think that, in all honesty, if you choose to be a parent in this world, if you choose to be a father or mother, a mentor or a guardian or whatever, if you choose to have people that are close to you in your life, your own children, you need to be 100% connected in with them on all different levels. Doesn't mean you have to give them all your time in the world, because you still need to look after you first. I honestly believe you do have to be selfish to be selfless. You always have to fill up your own cup first. But the thing is, for me, I honestly just think that, for a lot of the guys, they're so worried about what's next that they're not truly focusing on the present. And I know that as a guy myself. And for me, I know that as long as I'm here for my boys, as long as I'm here for my queen, and I know that I can live in harmony with them and have a holistic environment, that those other things will actually eventuate, because the universe sees that I'm actually in alignment with what I'm actually wanting to live my purpose on. Therefore, the opportunities will arise. And the funny thing was, somebody like yourself never met each other in our lives, never even knew each other. Out of nowhere, I received a message from you. And I was just like, what a beautiful experience. I kind of started to waver away thinking, is this for me? And the universe just drops this little bit of, gold dust and goes, hey, look, you are on the right path. Here's another opportunity to share your journey and get it out there. And,
Okay.
I only think that's going to happen if you're in full alignment with your purpose in life.
And it's really funny that you actually speak to this. Well, no, it's not, because I understand how the universe works, but this has been my own personal struggle in the last couple of days. And it's like, am I really in alignment with what I'm supposed to be doing? It's been challenging being, one, a woman working with men, and two, my journey has been hard and fast, a lot like your relationship. And so my conscious journey has been really short. And it's like, have I got enough knowledge? Have I got enough awareness? Can I really help people? Should I be doing this? And so this story and this questioning and this self-doubts all come up, and I just put it out there. I was like, okay, universe, this is what you are really wanting me to do. And I feel like I'm aligned, but I'm just still, there was, I guess, that expectation of it should be happening faster, or I should be getting, this many clients, or I should be reaching this many people has come up. And it's like, well, I'm not meeting this invisible expectation line.
Mm-hmm.
And asking for that message to come through. And like you, the next day I woke up and I had 3 new clients and an invite to a podcast, and it was like, okay, right. I surrender.
Thank you, universe.
Yeah, but how many, like that, those things, they're going to keep challenging us. They're going to keep popping up, because there's layers to, like, of self-doubt, layers of unworthiness, layers of trust within ourselves and with our own alignment of we haven't been brought up to trust our own instincts, to trust our alignment, or to even be aligned. So it's a constant journey. I know that we started late, and I don't want to hold you too long either. But I do know that you work with NLP. I would love to hear a lot about it, or a little about it, and how you work with your clients. I've only ever experienced the timeline therapy before, so I don't actually know too much about NLP, but I would love to hear how you use that in your coaching sessions.
So look, for me, to be perfectly honest, I know that there's been situations in more recent times where I've sort of wavered away from it in certain people I've worked with and things like that. For a period of time after I actually got my certifications, and that I actually, for some reason other than another, I just trusted the universe. I actually fell out of alignment with it straight away. And it actually took me probably about a good couple of months to actually work on myself, to then feel comfortable enough to actually get back into it. And I didn't know why at the time. But then I actually found through the sessions that I did with a mentor of mine that I'd just done it for the wrong reasons. I'd done it for that pre-expectation of I have to get something, because then that'll kickstart the journey. If I have this, and it was just another one of my little stepping stones. And look, what I find is that NLP is, it is a beautiful process. And when I actually did it myself, there was a lot of stuff that opened up that was, sitting deep within my childhood from my very early years that I even forgot about. And I think it's just a powerful resource and a powerful tool, because a lot of the times we just don't even know the stuff there. We don't even know the reason, as men and as women, why we feel the way we feel. And it's extremely frustrating. The thing is, this tool, by doing, your timeline therapy and the other different sort of ways that, you operate, what it does is it uncovers a lot of uncomfortable truths. And with timeline therapy, while I may not always adopt the methodology the whole way through, but I might take snippets from it, what I find is a lot of the times when the people that I've worked with, I'll start asking them certain questions and sort of unraveling their sort of childhood, or a certain moment, just taking them back to that exact moment of where they feel triggered. and going back further and further and further. A lot of the guy that I was talking before about the father, a situation will come up and I'll ask, what's next? And then they'll say, okay, this is what, and I'm like, okay, what would happen? What would happen next? Okay. And then basically going back and back and back and back. And I'll actually do it with situations, but also emotions. And for me, what it does is it actually just keeps unraveling and unraveling and unraveling and unraveling and unraveling. And it gets to a point where there's no more answers. And the thing is, you don't realize it, but it's something that you never actually believed before or never even knew was there before. And by doing that, you've hit that sort of point where you can go, cool, all the things you just told me about before, in the nicest possible way, were bullshit. They were bullshit. They were all the pre-expectations that, or the things that you thought you wanted me to hear, or that you wanted to hear in yourself. Now we have the real reason. We've dusted everything off. We've ripped all the layers away of the onion. We're down at the core. Now we can get down to business. This is where the scary shit starts, and this is where we're actually going to touch base on. And it's a real nerve point for a lot of people, because at the end of the day, I've even done it on myself before. I've even used it on myself before, and through some of the techniques that I've adopted, it definitely does still work on, the individual. It can get a little bit sort of clunky if you try and use it on family members and stuff like that, because there's that sort of thing of like they want to trick you sometimes, or they don't want to open up. But for the guys, I just think that it's, especially timeline therapy, I think it's extremely potent. Just knowing that you can actually, and as an experience, I'd love to share this. When I was doing my own journey through NLP, actually stepping outside of your individual, stepping outside of who you are, and actually seeing yourself from above. Now, once again, when I first did this, it sounded airy-fairy, but for me, I actually detached from who I was, and I could actually see myself back in that moment of, when I was most scared. And I actually got to journey through that. And it was a very powerful process to know that I could actually see myself in my vulnerable state, but now in my conscious self, and actually adopt that and appreciate who I was in that moment in a whole new light, in a whole new perspective. But for me, I just know that it does take time. You've got to be very willing and open to go there, much like anything like hypnosis. You gotta believe that you want to go there, because if you don't, it's just not going to happen. It's not. You're just going to have roadblocks, and it's just not going to work.
And that is a similar, I call it inquiry of the mind, where basically, if you think of like when your 4-year-old gets to that age and they're like, but why? But why? But why? And they ask that question, and it's like, well, ask yourself, so why? And questioning that, and why did you feel like that, and where did that come from? And you just keep questioning and questioning, and you go back and until you strip back all those layers, and that it's truly, you pinpointed the most important point of it. If you're not willing to take ownership or to feel it, then and you're not really ready to receive that, you're not going to get anywhere with it. And I think there's people that can sit in that space of not actually wanting to go into that deep level of vulnerability and uncomfortability for a really long space. And it takes a lot of ownership, because you have to see where you maybe haven't been the best person, where you have held a lot of shame, where you have held guilt towards different situations. And it takes real fucking courage to go there and to feel it and to do it. But if you allow yourself to be in that space, that's where the real magic happens. And it happens so fast at times that it's just like, oh, it's magic.
It is. Yeah, and it just, I guess for me, just to sort of touch on one final point, was that as men, you do have to be, I guess, a little bit more patient in terms of obviously exploring those avenues, because as men, I know that it's harder to crack us. We're not naturally open to just sort of, being vulnerable and sort of sharing in that moment. So the guys I have worked with, it's, it's actually getting to know them. It's, building a relationship first. It's hanging out with them. It's, sort of just not being false and not going, cool, okay, we've got a week to become mates, and then we're gonna get down to shit. It's like, it's really just being genuine, just hanging out with them, listening in, having no expectations, and going, dude, just I'm here as a set of ears. Like, just chat, here we go. And a lot of the times that's when they'll naturally then become opened up and go, holy crap, I'm not the only person. Or going to these circles, like, asking men like, hey, look, I get that you're scared, but just come to this circle. You don't even have to speak. You don't even have to involve yourself. Mate, even just come and listen. And then, even take 2, 3, 4 weeks to just listen. And then eventually you might feel comfortable to, start even saying a couple of words, and then a sentence, and then opening up, and next minute you're bawling your eyes out. So it's like, it's a slow process, but it can be a beautiful process. But like you said, it's just, you got to be willing to go there.
And that's it. It's also not judging it, not judging yourself in how quickly it does take you to unfold, like that level of, or how quickly it does take you to actually work through that stuff, because that ego, as we know, that sits on our shoulder is really, really strong. And it's just having total allowance of how long or short your journey will be, and the patience and the patience and presence. So what upcoming works do you have, and how do you work with clients so that the people listening to this call can get in contact with you? And where can they find you on socials and get in contact with you?
I have been pretty slack with Instagram, so I probably wouldn't look for me there just yet. But look, for me personally, I have a couple of different pages. So like the Conscious Fatherhood, that's one that I created as more of a holistic sort of community. So, men can, sort of come in there and just sort of, I guess, have a place to sort of see what it means to be conscious as a man, as a father. And a lot of the content that I provide in there is very just open, very raw about the journey and my stories, more of sort of less on a coaching side, but more of just as an advice, and an area where people can literally go, hey, look, this guy gets me. And you can come in there and sort of just hear about it. I do obviously have a private fathers group called Fathers on Purpose. And that's sort of where I take things a little bit more further. So it's for guys that are really sort of just wanting to up-level.
Sorry, Patrick, you cut out.
Not just the spiritually, mentally. Sorry, got me?
Yeah, you're back now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's basically a group where the guys actually are there to, I've got a mantra within the group, the 3 E's. So it's express, elevate, and empower. And it's really just sort of there to be able to actually hold each other accountable. It's a sacred space where, I'm going to be setting up a weekly Zoom call coming up as well soon, just to allow those fathers that can't get the time to actually connect up in person to know that there is an avenue to actually have other men to speak to and to connect in with. Now, look, it's not an area where we're just talking about going to the pub and this and stuff like that. It's actually an area where you can feel safe, know that what you open up about is sacred, and that what stays in the circle stays in the circle. And it just gives them an avenue to really know that there's other guys out there just like them. So I am going to be opening that up pretty soon. But for me, I guess to take it to a further level is that it's still in the works, but I'm going to be opening up some retreats probably in the next, I'd say probably could be like 2 to 3 months. I've just got it with COVID, doesn't help with a lot of stuff. But if any father wants to jump into our group, I welcome them with open arms. I'm wanting to get so many more people in there. I know that unfortunately, due to a lot of the changing with algorithms and me feeling, like I said, like a 90-year-old man, the exposure, I just wanted to get out there. I want as many men to get in there. And, if there's women listening to this tonight and you feel like your husbands and, the fathers and that need this, bring them in, invite them in, share it, get it out there, because I'm actually going to be dropping in not only sort of, I guess, the weekly Zooms, but also the in-person retreats, but I'm going to be jumping in and doing like little workshops, as well, just to sort of just offer as much as as I can to these fathers. And I want to keep it where I don't have myself in too many things. I want to keep it, heart-centered to just this group and the conscious fatherhood, because beforehand I would go ahead and just try and get into everything, and I just wasn't feeling in alignment. So for me, the Fathers on Purpose group is really my baby. It's what I want to sort of grow, and I want to see as many fathers across, all over Australia jump in there and just sort of start, really just hitting on their purpose, just growing and allowing, them to have the ability to go ahead and sort of connect in deeper with their children. For those that are on the Sunshine Coast, I don't know if anyone would be on here that actually is there, but I'm looking at actually also wanting to do not only the Zooms, but once we can recommence past COVID, actually in-person fathers meetups, but with a bit of a twist. So what I was looking at doing is actually on alternating weeks, have just the fathers there and connecting in and, sort of sharing what's on our heart. For those who want to be there in person, it adds a different element to it when, you're in person, but also on the alternating weeks, bringing your children. So bringing your children along, because what it does is it allows those fathers that are, working away, fly in, fly out, or, really hard with their rosters or whatever it is, to spend that nurturing time with their kids. And let's be honest, it's a win-win for both parties because it gives mum a break. So, and I can guarantee that all the women on here that are listening, all the mums, would be fucking putting their hands up, fist pumping, and would be absolutely loving the idea, because not only is it a beautiful experience, but it then actually allows, the queens and the mothers out there to see a different, a different level of appreciation with their husbands. And, and I just think it's a beautiful space. And I think it's something that's not out there enough. I really don't. And for me, I've sat with it for a long time, and I've pivoted and changed and put this here and done this and dropped this off and fell out of alignment, but it feels more right than ever. So just know that if you want to jump in, Fathers on Purpose community group, search for it on Facebook, I'm in there, or just keep checking out Conscious Fatherhood. I'm going to be dropping in as much content as I can, just to keep on delivering and supporting fathers.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I really, really appreciate your time and jumping on board, and completely agree. It's about spreading the awareness, giving men the opportunity to choose something different, not only for themselves, but for their partners and their family and their children, so that we can create a different idea of what society's definition is of what it is to be a man. And by doing that, we're going to have a lot more relationships that are in union and in love, rather than the level of separation that we have. So I have so much gratitude for you and your work, and thank you for showing up, and continually doing the work for yourself. Thank you so much for your time.
No worries at all. I would just say, as a parting thing, just for the fathers that aren't on the Sunshine Coast, obviously very hard to get the in-person meetups once they do commence. I don't care if you're literally in Western Australia, New Zealand, even not even in Australia, anywhere in the world, just connect into that group online. I don't care how big the Zooms get, the more the merrier. At the end of the day, I just want to make sure that fathers know there is an avenue for it, and that you do have the ability to connect them with guys that are going through just the same struggles as you. You don't know it until you connect in. Don't feel afraid, because those containers are beautiful for the simple reason that we're all there for each other.
So beautiful. It is. It's so beautiful. And I am super grateful that I have so many people like yourself throughout the Gold Coast, Brisbane and Sunshine Coast specifically, plus in Western Australia, that are sharing these men's groups, and just watching the energy and the community, and talking to some of these men in private messages around how much this brotherhood and connection has helped them on their journey, and how fearful they were. And then when they've dropped into that level of vulnerability to show up, how much change it's actually created in their life. And just watching these groups each week seem to grow, and the actual energy in these photos just brings me like so much joy, that it's definitely something that I think at least try once.
Why not? What do you got to lose?
Yeah, exactly. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Patrick. And
No worries at
I
all.
will speak to you soon.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.